My name is Daniel Rivers, and I'm 42 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. What I'm about to share with you is the most profound experience of my life, a near-death encounter that completely transformed who I am and how I understand existence. Before this happened, I thought I had life figured out, but I was about to discover how wrong I was. I need to warn you up front. This isn't going to be the typical near-death experience story you might have heard before. There's no tunnel of light leading to peaceful meadows or reunions with deceased relatives. What I experienced was far more intense, challenging, and ultimately life-changing than anything I could have imagined. It forced me to confront truths about myself and reality that I had spent decades avoiding. I worked as a freelance web developer from my downtown apartment, enjoying the creative freedom and flexibility it provided. My specialty was creating websites for small businesses and non-profits, work that felt meaningful and allowed me to set my own schedule. The financial independence was something I cherished. No boss looking over my shoulder, no office politics to navigate. I had been in a committed relationship with my partner, Alex, for nearly 4 years. We shared a comfortable life together in our Pearl District loft, complete with our 2 rescue dogs, Max, a golden retriever mix, and Luna, a border collie who was far too smart for her own good. Our weekends were filled with hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, trying new restaurants in the city's diverse neighborhoods, and planning future trips to places we'd always wanted to visit. Alex worked as a nurse at OHSU, and our different schedules actually worked well for us. While he dealt with the structured demands of hospital life, I thrived in the creative chaos of freelance work. We complemented each other in many ways. He was methodical and organized, while I was more spontaneous and artistic. My mornings typically began with a run along the Willamette River, a routine I'd maintained for over 5 years. There was something about the early morning mist rising off the water, the sight of the city slowly waking up, that centered me for the day ahead. After my run, I'd return home for strong black coffee while checking emails and reviewing project deadlines. I was raised Methodist in a small town outside Salem, but hadn't attended church since my sophomore year of college. Faith wasn't something I thought much about. I believed that if there was a higher power, acceptance and love were all that mattered. My parents had struggled with my sexuality initially, but eventually came to terms with it, especially after meeting Alex and seeing how happy we were together. Looking back now, I realize how comfortable I had become in my assumptions about life, morality, and spirituality. I had constructed a worldview that felt safe and affirming, one that told me I was living authentically, and that any higher power would surely approve of a life built on love and commitment. I was about to discover how deeply mistaken I was. That Tuesday in October started ordinarily enough. I was driving my Honda Civic to meet a new client in Beaverton, listening to a podcast about digital marketing trends. The autumn rain had just stopped, leaving the road slick but manageable. I had just texted Alex about picking up dinner on my way home when everything changed in an instant. On Highway 26, just past the tunnel, a delivery truck ran the red light at the Sylvan intersection. I saw it approaching from my peripheral vision, but had no time to react. The impact was devastating. The truck's front end collided directly with my driver's side door at approximately 50 mph. The force of the collision sent my car spinning across 3 lanes before it slammed into the concrete barrier. The sound was deafening, metal crushing, glass shattering, the screech of tires on asphalt. Then sudden silence. A construction worker at a nearby site witnessed the entire accident and immediately called 911. The first responders later told me it took them nearly 40 minutes to extract me from the wreckage using hydraulic tools. By that time, I had suffered extensive injuries. 6 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, severe internal bleeding, and significant head trauma. The paramedics worked on me for several minutes at the scene before rushing me to Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. Alex received the call while at work and raced to the hospital, but I was already in critical surgery by the time he arrived. The medical team later informed me that I had died twice during transport, once for 2.5 minutes, and again for nearly 5 minutes. It was during these moments of clinical death that my entire understanding of reality would be forever altered. The transition from life to death wasn't gradual, it was immediate and startling. One moment I was aware of the paramedics working frantically over my body, their voices urgent and strained. And the next, I found myself hovering above the ambulance, watching the scene unfold below me with supernatural clarity. What struck me first was how different everything looked from this elevated perspective. I could see details that should have been impossible to observe. The expressions on the paramedics' faces, the way one of them kept checking his watch, the concern in their voices as they radioed ahead to the hospital. Yet, despite watching my own body being worked on, I felt strangely detached from it all, like watching a movie about someone else's life. What followed wasn't the peaceful, warm light often described in near-death accounts. Instead, I was pulled into what I can only describe as a cosmic whirlwind, a tunnel of swirling energy that drew me forward with irresistible force. The sensation was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, like being caught in a tornado made of pure light and sound. The tunnel itself defied all earthly description. Colors that don't exist in our physical spectrum swirled around me in patterns that seemed to have their own intelligence. There was a deep, resonating vibration that seemed to penetrate my very essence, not heard with ears, but felt through every part of my being. It was as if the universe itself was humming, and I was being drawn into the source of that cosmic song. As I traveled through this tunnel, something extraordinary began to happen. Every moment of my life started playing simultaneously, but not as mere memories. I experienced each event with perfect clarity, feeling the full emotional and spiritual weight of every decision I had ever made. It was like having access to a divine video library, where every scene was available instantly and completely. The most startling revelation concerned my relationship with Alex. What I had always viewed as genuine love, and it was love in many ways, appeared completely different from this new perspective. I could see the spiritual dimension of our relationship, and what I witnessed shook me to my core. I could see how our romantic relationship, while filled with caring, tenderness, and mutual support, was somehow creating spiritual damage to both of us. Each intimate moment appeared as shadows on our souls, like dark stains spreading through clear water. It wasn't that we were bad people or that we didn't care for each other. We did, deeply. But I was seeing the spiritual reality behind our physical relationship, and it was devastating. I was shown scenes from my childhood with new understanding. I saw myself at age 7, the first time I felt different from other boys during a game of soccer. I remembered the confusion when other boys talked about girls they liked, and I felt nothing. I witnessed my teenage years, the fear, the shame, the desperate attempts to fit in, and eventually my decision to embrace what I thought was my authentic self. But from this elevated viewpoint, I could see how each step away from traditional values had led me further from spiritual truth. It wasn't that my feelings were wrong for existing. I understood now that they were the result of various influences and experiences. But the choices I made in response to those feelings, the identity I built around them, the way I encouraged others to do the same, all of this carried spiritual weight I had never considered. The tunnel experience culminated in a vast, indescribable space where I found myself in the presence of a being I immediately recognized as Jesus Christ. This wasn't the gentle, meek figure from religious artwork. This was the King of all creation, radiating authority and love so intense it was almost overwhelming. In his presence, every justification I had ever made for my lifestyle crumbled. There was no hiding, no pretending, no rationalizing. He communicated not through words, but through direct transmission of understanding into my consciousness. The message was complex and profound. He loved me with an intensity that was both beautiful and painful. But that love didn't equal approval of all my choices. I understood that my attractions themselves weren't the issue. It was my decision to act upon them, to build my identity around them, and to encourage others to do the same that created the spiritual problem. Jesus then showed me countless other souls who had made similar choices. They existed in what I can only describe as a state of spiritual limbo, not in hell, but certainly not in heaven. They were trapped by their own justifications, unable to progress because they refused to acknowledge the truth about their decisions. Many of these souls had been religious people, even Christians, who had chosen to reinterpret Scripture to justify their lifestyle rather than conform to divine design. This selective interpretation had created an impenetrable barrier between them and true spiritual fulfillment. What I witnessed next still haunts me. I was given glimpses of hell, not the cartoon version with demons and fire, but something far more terrifying: complete separation from divine love. The souls there experienced the full consequence of their earthly choices, and I understood that this wasn't punishment from an angry God, but the natural result of choosing to live permanently separated from Him. Jesus began revealing truths about sexuality and relationships as originally designed. I saw how the union between man and woman represented something far greater than physical connection. It was a spiritual reality reflecting deep truths about the divine relationship with humanity. From this heavenly perspective, I could see that modern culture's embrace of alternative lifestyles wasn't progress, but sophisticated deception. Each departure from traditional marriage and gender roles represented movement away from divine truth. The most painful part was seeing how my own advocacy had affected others. Every time I had spoken in favor of LGBTQ+ rights, every social media post I had made, every conversation where I had encouraged someone to be their authentic self, I could see the spiritual impact of these actions. Young people I had influenced, friends I had encouraged, strangers who had read my posts. Each interaction carried weight, and I felt crushing responsibility for potentially leading others away from salvation. Yet through all of this revelation, I felt no condemnation from Jesus, only overwhelming love and a deep desire for me to understand truth. He showed me that many of my friends in the gay community were actually struggling internally with their choices, despite outward appearances of happiness and pride. I was then presented with two possible futures. I could continue my current path and eventually face eternal consequences, or I could embrace this truth, change my life, and help others do the same. The contrast between these possibilities was stark and undeniable. Jesus revealed that my same-sex attractions weren't my fault. They resulted from various influences and experiences throughout my life. However, how I chose to respond to these attractions was entirely my responsibility. He offered the strength to resist these desires, even if they didn't completely disappear in this lifetime. The most powerful vision showed me people who had successfully left homosexual lifestyles. Their struggles were immense, but their joy in following truth was even greater. I saw their spiritual rewards, crowns of victory earned through faithful, difficult choices. At this point, I found myself in what resembled a heavenly courtroom, but instead of facing judgment, I was offered a choice: return to earth with this new understanding, or remain and face immediate judgment for my unrepented decisions. The weight of this choice was enormous. Returning meant completely transforming my life, losing friends, facing criticism, leaving Alex, whom I genuinely loved. But staying meant confronting judgment for sins I had refused to acknowledge. Jesus showed me that my return would serve a greater purpose. My experience could help others trapped in similar lifestyles. He revealed how many people were secretly questioning their sexual identity, but felt too afraid or confused to seek change. I was given a glimpse of the support system that would be available. Genuine Christians who would help me transition, counselors who understood the spiritual aspects of sexuality, and unexpected allies along the way. The most moving part was seeing how my testimony could potentially save others. I was shown specific people, some I knew, others I hadn't met, whose eternal destinies could change because of my willingness to speak truth. Before making my decision, I received one last vision of my potential future. I saw myself speaking to groups, sharing my testimony, and helping others find freedom from homosexual lifestyles. I witnessed tears of joy as people found healing through accepting divine design for sexuality, but I was also shown the cost. Being called a bigot and traitor by the LGBTQ+ community, former friends turning away, social media attacks, even threats to my safety. Yet alongside these challenges, I saw the profound peace that comes from living in alignment with truth. The choice became clear. With a mixture of fear and determination, I decided to return. The moment I made this decision, overwhelming peace and purpose flooded through me, despite knowing the difficulties ahead. Just before returning to my body, I received one final message. My mission wasn't to condemn, but to love, helping others discover the same truth I had found, always with compassion and understanding, remembering that I too had once been blind to these truths. Waking up in the hospital felt like being reborn. The physical pain was intense, but it paled compared to the spiritual awakening I had experienced. Alex was beside my bed, holding my hand, but I knew our relationship could never be the same.